no more broadband money through ARPA. Is that correct or false?
Mike, do you want to make a comment on that? I will say this, that we're proposing to use the capital projects money of $158 million in its entirety on broadband as needed. Okay. Now we'll have to go through Treasury to do that, but then we'll use the ARPA for other projects. So where do we stand, Mike, as far as you're concerned with regard to the funding of broadband in Arkansas?
Well, if we can use all 158 million of those funds for it, I think would be okay for this year until we get the infrastructure funding down. Now, if we can't use all 158 million, we would be looking to more, because we do have projects in the queue that will be ready to go. We did get the approval yesterday from Treasury on the $47.5 million, which will immediately get put to use and to work on the projects that we have in the queue. But we anticipate somewhere about that neighborhood of 158 million in projects being ready this year. The bulk of what's going to be needed for broadband build out for the future will come through the infrastructure funding, which is yet to be determined, but that's estimated anywhere from 100 million all the way up to, we've heard, as high as, potentially $1 billion. But what we have standing ready in the queue is that 158 million that Secretary Walther referenced. So as long as we have access to that, we should be good for this year.
And that's our plan also.
Yeah, I think the main thing is that when we started down this path with ARPA funds, the one thing that I think that generally the legislature all agreed on was that this was the #1 priority. And I just don't want to be doling out these dollars, and at the end of the day, we're 100 million short on broadband, and we find ourselves out of funding. So appreciate that. Second thing was question. The 9 million for the project to be built. Did you say that's on leased? It's going to be on leased land from the city?
Yes, sir. Women and Children First have a 99-year lease on the property. It's situated in Southwest Little Rock, surrounded with medical clinics on one side, police station, and other facilities that will augment the Family Peace Center.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question about the lease. Now, Ms. Fran.
Representative Kavanaugh, please ask your question.
So if you got a 99-year lease on it, what does the lease say happens to the building at the end of the lease?
I believe Ms. Brown is on here that may be able to answer that question.
Well, I can't really answer the question. I don't have the lease in front of me, and this was about 3 or 4 years ago when we did get this land. But I will certainly let you know. I would think that it would either revert back to the city or a new lease would be constructed. We plan for this shelter to go on for the next 100+ years. So, as we're so successful, we want to just keep this going. And I'm sure the success will be proven and the city will, re-up our lease. I won't be there to see it, but I'm sure they will. But I'll let you know.
Yeah, if you can, because some of those leases, it automatically, reverts back to the owner of the land. And if we're going to put state money into something and it's going to revert back to somebody else, we need to know that.
You're absolutely correct. And I will get that answer for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any additional questions? Do I have a motion for the approval?
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we approve the proposal.
Thank you, Secretary Brissett. And a second?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Any additional questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion has been passed. Andy, would you go on to the Arkansas Tech, please?
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Our second proposal today is at Arkansas Tech University. It's labeled Morton Hall, and it's for $3.2 million. This proposal is to provide funds needed to expand medical training capability in the Arkansas River Valley area. Morton Hall is located next to St. Mary's Regional Medical Center in Russellville. And it also is surrounded by other area healthcare providers, thus providing students with ready access to clinical experiences. The proposed renovation of Morton Hall will consist of demolition and renovation to expand under roof space for healthcare programs. Additionally, the renovation includes mechanical, technological, and other upgrades meeting code requirements. The capital improvement project is inclusive of a multi-purpose community structure to be utilized for academic programming and community outreach activities. In essence, they're going to be expanding their LPN programs and CNA programs, thus leading to expansion of the RN programs at Arkansas Tech.
Are there any questions?
Yes, this is Representative Kavanaugh. I have, and this isn't just going to deal with Arkansas Tech, but it's also going to deal with all of the higher education ones. So I'll just ask this to be for all of them. So really what I want to know is how much ARPA funds did they actually get at the individual schools? And how was that used? Because they're coming to us, and I know the schools got ARPA funds directly, is my understanding. So I'd kind of like to know that information. And just out of curiosity, I noticed on the master list that there are lots of higher education colleges that ask for the similar type of maintenance. How come we're not doing them all at one time instead of one individually? And then the my third part of the question is, I don't see anything, and where is the status of the independent colleges provide assistance to them?
Okay. For your first question, we can get you that information. They, as I understand it, colleges and universities received what I believe is referred to as HERF-3 funds. And I believe we've got a listing here that we can provide to you for all the colleges in the state of Arkansas.
You don't do any monitoring of that.
We do not do any monitoring of that. That goes directly to the institutions themselves, is my understanding. I apologize. Your second question, Representative Kavanaugh.
Yes, on the master list, and we have almost every one of our higher education facilities have asked for these similar type of fundings that we're reviewing this morning. How come we didn't do all of them at one time rather than individually?
These are the ones that we had proposals ready for presentation. And so we brought them in groups. The first 4 that you're going to hear, well, 5 technically, but we're going to draw 1, are for typically expansion of nursing programs. The last couple of them were ones that we had reviewed that were expansion of other academic facilities. And so we just brought these because they were ready and prepared to go after being vetted by our consultants.
Okay, so the other ones that are on the master list, they're not, my understanding is they've been submitted and they're ready to go too. They just hadn't been reviewed by the consultant.
Some of them are in review, and I'll have to look at one of my colleagues here, so she's going to give me a thumbs up or thumbs down. Some of them are in review and some of them are eligible.
Representative Kavanaugh, with regard to the independent colleges, that is still under review.
That's still in review.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay. Here.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question/statement at the proper time.
Okay.
Okay. So UAMS and such are still in review. We've got one from Monticello still in review with our consultants. We've got several others that are also still in review from other universities, Representative Kavanaugh. So yes, those appear to be in review at this time.
Okay, thank you. And those will be coming at a different meeting, I'm assuming. Is that what the plan is?
Yes.
Thank you.
Representative Wardlaw, do you have a question or comment?
I do. When looking at these college programs that are there to expand nursing programs, to expand healthcare type programs, one thing we're going to learn later in this presentation is what trouble we're in healthcare. And the reasons that we're in those trouble is because of shortage of certain job or certain employees, nurses in particular. So I want to be clear to the committee and to the legislature going forward that without putting money into training of these programs, we are prolonging the problems in our hospitals and our rural areas. So I am much in favor of doing as much as we can with higher ed to make sure we have as many trained medical professionals in the field as possible.
Thank you, Representative Wardlaw.
Secretary Walter. This is Johnny Key.
Yes, Secretary Key.
Yeah, so I think maybe I can help too with Representative Kavanaugh's question. The HERE funding, the HEERF funding that our higher ed institutions received, that was very restricted in how they could use that in support of students. In some cases, looking at relief for student fees, debt, things that were owed at the time that institutions may have had to shut down. So a variety of things, but capital type expenditures were not allowed under that. So that's where I would say they all used it differently depending on their own situation, but it was very specific for student success, student relief, that type of thing. And Dr. Eggensberger can nod if that's okay. Yeah, he's nodding. So.
So you have spotted over in the corner. Thank you, Secretary Key. Representative Kavanaugh, do you have any additional questions? Are there any other questions? Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion for Arkansas Tech.
AC Hurst, make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, and we have a second from Representative Wardlaw. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is Black River Technical College. Andy.
Black River Technical College is seeking $4.622 million. Black River Tech is seeking these funds for the construction of a short-term housing and training facility. The facility will provide for students and faculty short-term housing to accelerate training programs, will function also as a regional response center during disasters, and will serve as an overflow hospital during emergencies. It offers a wide variety of community health monitoring and critical health services in partnership with Northeast Arkansas hospitals, medical clinics, and health units. It also partners in the community and directly provides support services to the local community. College currently provides training for healthcare personnel and emergency responders. And this expanded facility will help provide additional students through their accelerated programs, thus reducing time needed to train nurses, therapists, and other emergency responders. And that's the synopsis of the material you have.
Are there any questions? May I have a motion?
Chairman Johnny Key, I move approval.
Thanks, Secretary Key. And a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you, Secretary Mallory. Okay, all those in favor of Black River, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The next item is National Park College. Andy, would you bring us up to date on that?
Okay. National Park College has revised their plan. And we have not had a chance to review it and submit it to our consultants for their review. So we're going to withdraw that from today's agenda.
By the way, that occurred this morning,
Yes,
and that is at their request.
correct.
Okay.
All right.
All right, let's move on to Northwest. Are there any questions? I'm sorry. All right, hearing none, let's move on to Northwest Technical Institute.
Okay. Northwest Technical Institute, this will likely be a disbursement to the Northwest Tech Institute, our educational foundation, is requesting $5 million to assist with the construction of a 50,000 square foot allied health facility. This will expand their capabilities to train LPNs, surgical tech, certified nursing assistants, and other health programs in the area. The newly constructed facility will increase enrollment in these programs, update classrooms and labs with modern technology, and provide simulator space needed for real life healthcare environments. That's a synopsis of what you had in your packet.
Are there any questions? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval.
Thank you, Secretary Key. And a second.
Second the motion, Ken Ferguson.
Thank you, Representative Ferguson. Any additional questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. The next item on the agenda is Philander Smith College. Andy?
Okay, Philander Smith College is seeking $5 million to expand, again, their healthcare programs. Philander Smith College was established in 1877. It's the oldest historically Black college or university in Arkansas. They have a foundation in their allied and public health space that they need to expand. They're preparing to expand this to increase the licensed practical nurse, the LPN program, the CNA program, and to provide for the Panther Pantry and Fresh Market, which will assist students who come from disadvantaged communities and lower socioeconomics. The Dr. Joycelyn Elders School of Allied and Public Health facility would be a multi-purpose community resource. It'll, like I mentioned, it'll be the creation of a CNA LPN program to educate, provide additional healthcare workers to the state of Arkansas. Expansion of the community health clinic, which reaches out to the local community and provides services to the underserved communities and is a pandemic resource support site. And expand the food pantry here again to serve the community, the surrounding community, who may be in what's called food deserts or lack proper nutrition. And that's a summary of what's in your packet.
Thank you, Andy. Are there any questions? Okay. May I have a motion for approval?
Move for the adoption of this request. Kenneth Ferguson.
Thank you, Representative Ferguson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Senator. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you, Committee.
Did you want to say anything?
No, this is Linda Chesterfield. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing this. Philander Smith is in the heart of one of the most underserved communities in Little Rock. And one of the things that we know we need are more nurses. And there is a critical shortage of minority nurses. And so it's just a joy to hear you say yes to this. We've been working on it for some time. And I appreciate especially Paul Lothian. I always appreciate you. But Paul has worked diligently with this group to try to get us to this place. And I know that this will be a huge help to the communities we serve. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. And I think y'all can see there's a common thread and theme throughout these requests that we passed today. Okay, thank you. Let's move on to UAPB. Southeast Arkansas, right? I'm going to keep you honest.
Okay, so Southeast Arkansas College, or CARC, is requesting $3 million for the constructions. Basically, it'll aid in the construction of a $14 million student and community center. The new facility will provide for a multi-purpose college and community facility, will provide job training and development, educational services, healthcare monitoring and related services, and emergency services during a publicly declared emergency. This facility will offer workforce support services, credit and non-credit academic programs, health-related services. So here again, they're going to expand into the CNA and potentially LPN programs, other services that will lift individuals out of poverty. They will also provide academic programs in cybersecurity, nursing, allied health programs such as occupational therapy assistants, patient care technicians, and medical assistants. So here we have another program that's expanding our medical workforce. And that's a synopsis of what's in your packet.
Any questions? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move for adoption of this proposal.
Thank you, Representative Ferguson.
I'll second.
All right, thank you, Secretary. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, now we'll go to UAPB.
Okay. The University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff is seeking $3 million for what's called a Student Engagement Center. And it will combine access for the students and the surrounding communities for healthcare, technology, academic support, career planning support, and other activities on campus. This is a critical need for UAPB. Their current activity student engagement center or student center that is being replaced was built in 1951. They've evaluated this and believe that this is the best use of these funds in developing the needed facility to put on public health fairs, have co-curriculum, learning, technology, and extracurricular activities on the UAPB campus. So they're going to provide some health services to the local community through this facility. And that's a synopsis of what's on your what's in your packet.
Questions? Hearing none, do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move for adoption of this proposal.
Thank you.
Second.
Who was that?
Representative Wardlaw.
Okay, thank you, Representative Wardlaw. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the next one, University of Arkansas at Monticello.
University of Arkansas at Monticello is seeking $6 million to renovate the mechanical systems in their science center. So this is where they conduct all their lab classes, their science classes and such. This facility is home to many courses, including allied health programs that they currently have on campus. The system is old and it is not conducive to controlling the spread of COVID-19 on campus. This is also the building that serves many general education courses. Classes are large in size and the air circulation is poor currently. So that is a general synopsis of what's in your packet for this proposal.
And I'd like to say I spent a lot of hours in that building.
Mr. Chair, this is Representative Wardlaw. I have a motion at the proper time.
Okay, may I have a motion?
A motion to adopt this report.
Thank you.
I'll second. Johnny Key.
Okay, thank you, Secretary Key. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, now we're down to the last three items, and I would like to recognize Secretary Cindy Gillespie to discuss the I will take them in order, and the first one is the ARHP rescue plan proposal.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Secretary Walther. As I start this, all three of these proposals do have some themes that run through them. They are all addressing some of the impacts that we have seen after the last 2 years of the pandemic on elements of our system. As Representative Wardlaw said, our medical system, as Representative Wardlaw said, some of these impacts have to do with staffing, lack of staffing, which leads to a shortage of beds, impacts on our hospital systems and our providers around the state. And then thirdly, I know we have all become acutely aware of the shortage of mental health resources in the state, as well as types of services. So these three proposals together attempt to address in a targeted way some of these issues and areas. The first one from the Rural Health Partnership, I do want to thank them for bringing this one forward, and thank DFNA and Representative Wardlaw and others who have helped as we've worked with them on this. Is an effort by this group to provide a mechanism to help not just the rural hospitals that are part of the Rural Health Partnership, but the services that would flow from this funding would be made available to all rural hospitals if they want to take advantage of them. And at the end of the day, all of these services really are about helping the hospitals move towards long-term sustainability. They've taken a hit going through the last 2 years. And for many of them, there's a need to really have a focused effort right now to develop sustainability plans and implement around a number of operational changes. So this first one is a request for $10 million that they've submitted. The funding would flow from DFNA directly to the Rural Health Partnership. And as you can see in the description, and Melly Bridewell is here, who can help provide more detail if needed around these. One component is something that the first component is really improving the model for swing bed coordination, which we all learned was going through the pandemic was incredibly important because it allows you to move patients more quickly, keep beds filled, and make sure that you're getting the patient to the right care. So they're looking to bring in a model there that can strengthen the relationship between the small rural hospitals and larger hospitals. And this will provide the technical assistance to help put that model in place. On-site healthcare provider simulation training is following in the theme of what we've been talking about today. This is having on-site capability to provide trainings actually at each of the hospital sites. Rural clinical nursing training. They currently do clinical rotations, and this would allow for an expansion of those. Integrating mental and behavioral health services into the systems better. This is an area that, as you know, Medicaid is quite focused on and is providing additional funding and payments. And so this will assist those rural hospitals being in their efforts to really bring in those services and learn how to both bring them in as well as to set up the business models and operations and infrastructure for them. And then social determinants of health, which is another area that we are all focused on in the state, which is connecting individuals throughout the state better to those services and resources that can help them meet their social needs, because this has such a direct impact on their health care. So you'll see the breakdown for the 10 million here. And as I said, each of these are components and areas that will help build towards sustainability for those hospitals.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Cindy, would you sort of tell us, I mean, this really fits in with our homes in so many ways. Tell me what that means when it says on behavioral health to enable rural hospitals to assemble the infrastructure and resources needed to implement mental and behavioral health services. Would you sort of tell us what that means in layman's terms?
Sure. And I will certainly also look to Melly or to Trish Gann, who is on as well, who's our head of behavioral health, to chime in on this. But your point, Senator, about the connection to our home is accurate as a piece of this. But the what it essentially means is that most of the rural hospitals are not currently, if not all of the rural hospitals, are not currently set up to be able to provide on-site mental health services. Now, they might end up choosing to do that by obviously a partnership with a local mental health service, but there's also a need for telehealth. The telehealth infrastructure is not in place in these hospitals. The structure to be able to bill, I mean, at the end of the day, sustainability is tied to revenue. So the structure to be able to bill for those services, as that gets put in place, has to come there. Our hope is, as our home rolls out, that we will have hospitals that open ACUs, acute crisis units, so that there are places for individuals who are undergoing crisis to be served for, a short period of time to help stabilize them. Setting up those ACUs actually has infrastructure work involved. It has tech work involved. It has doing the contracts with individuals, as well as training some of your staff on being able to work better with somebody who has mental health. So I'm sure they can provide a more detailed and better description than I have, but it's not something you just do, which is say, hi, I'm going to start offering mental health services, here. There is a whole business change they will have to go down to be able to effectively do this.
And this is Melly, and thank you so much for having me. But, really it's what we're looking at is we've been asked over and over, even by our own members, hospitals of wanting to integrate the behavioral health services, but not having the capacity to bring consultants in to say, what is feasible for my hospital to do? Is it feasible for us to open up a 5-bed unit? Is it feasible for us to open up, this service versus that service? And so bringing in this funding would bring in consultants that would help those hospitals really do this right, so that they're not moving into a direction that maybe they could not afford to do or not make money on. So that's
Are the professionals out there if we have the programs?
There are, but we're really looking at, more professionals that are at the federal level and national level. I mean, even with our swing bed coordination piece that we have here, as well as some of the consulting stuff we do, we work really hand in hand with the National Health Resource Center and the National Health Association that have those in place to do that. So bringing those people in to make sure that the hospitals aren't stepping into, a minefield if they decide to expand, but also working with federal agencies to really look at, the physical plan of things, because when you start talking about bringing in these services, there's also changes that need to be made to the hospital physical plan. And where does that funding come from? I mean, helping them, navigate that.
Thank you.
Okay. Any additional questions?
Mr. Chairman, this is Daryl Bassett. I have just a question. Secretary Gillespie, I really like the fact that this, I'm in favor of the proposal. I really like the fact that this is premised on a reimbursement process rather than a front-ended funding, and I like the cap on on management fee increases. And I really like the audit review process and the opportunity to recover any unused funds. And it may be early, but I have this question, and you may not be able to address this just now, but do we have any idea of how many hospitals would be eligible for this money? And do we have any idea of where those hospitals are in the state?
Yes, so there are 52 rural hospitals in the state that would be eligible to work with RHP if they want to on it. So it is not just the 17 hospitals that are actually members of RHP, but they will be the center point for where this funding is made available, but all 52 of the rural hospitals would be eligible.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion for the approval of this proposal.
So moved.
Tracy Hurst, I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Secretary Hurst. Second.
Second, Representative Wardlaw.
Thank you, Representative Wardlaw. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Secretary Gillespie, you're on again.
Okay, and is the next one, I don't have the agenda here.
Behavioral health.
The behavioral health, all right. This one is request for $5 million, which DHS will use to support training on intensive in-home services and assertive community therapy statewide to bring these evidence-based services into our state. So if I can take a second to explain, right now in Arkansas, we do not have a robust network for really intensive behavioral health services. These types of, we have residential where someone goes into, we have acute in a hospital, we have residential, and then we have home-based services, counseling services. But individuals who need truly intensive team-based services, we currently do not have a robust network of providers. We have very, very, very few providers in the state that can provide these services. And these services are critically important on the adult side, quite often for individuals who may get caught up in our court system, in our jail system. What they need are these intensive services where there is a team wrapped around them to keep them from being in a jail or in an institution. Same with on the child side, intensive in-home services, certain models have been shown to have a tremendous impact of preventing a child and a family from disrupting to the point that the child perhaps ends up in the child welfare system or the child winds up in a psychiatric facility. These types of intensive in-home services, as I said, we have such a limited capacity to provide them in our state. Medicaid is starting to pay for these services. When this next pass contract comes into play, October 1 of this year, in fact, the passes will be required to pay for these services for any adult or child who actually qualifies for them. This, for us, will be, we believe, a real game changer in our state, but we don't have providers. So Medicaid paying for the service does not do any good if we don't have providers out there who can provide them. So this $5 million is intended over the next 2 years for us to use to pay for the training and all the elements necessary to put together teams to be able all over the state to work in their communities to provide both ACT for adults and to provide intensive in-home services for children. Our goal is to end up with 100 teams for each type of service spread around this state which we think will have a huge impact and fill a really big hole. If there are questions, I do have Paula Stone and Trish Gann, who lead our behavioral health on and can help provide more detail.
Are there any questions?
Mr. Chair, I have a question. Representative
Representative Fowler? Yeah, please ask your question.
My question is on the training, is this going to be to pay? We're not doing the training in DHS, but we're actually going to be paying for them to get the training. So it's like a reimbursement for their training. Is that correct?
A reimbursement, but we're going to do it slightly. Yes. But what we're going to do.
Zoom meeting, I have everything. Oh.
So thanks. So, well, Trish or Paula, why don't you explain how you're going to do this?
So what we're going to do is we're going to have a process for whereby providers can apply for this training. We will pay the cost of that training for their teams to be paid, as well as these are fidelity-based models on the assertive community treatment side. That's a fidelity-based model. So it's to have the teams trained and certified, and then to complete the ongoing monitoring of whether or not those services are being provided to Fidelity. So we will reimburse for the training, and we will reimburse the trainers.
And since these are evidence-based models, Representative, it means that there are certain entities around the country who are set up to do the training and then monitor for fidelity. So we will do the relationship. DHS will establish the relationship with all of those entities, so that then those who apply and want to have a team trained, they will be able to choose the entity they want to work with, but they'll be working with an entity that can train to that model.
That is going to be able to provide us the evidence-based training, so that we have, which is what we're trying to go toward for services.
Yes, ma'am.
The other question I have is, are we going to have a process, and I'm sure Trish and Paula have thought about this, that we make sure we have all across the state, that we have it not just going into one area of the state, but we're going to have different ones and all throughout the whole state?
Trish, Paula?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, so those applications will come in through us for that training, and then the department will monitor those to ensure that we are getting statewide coverage for the trainings.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Representative Governor.
Are there any additional questions? Hearing none, I entertain a motion.
Renee Mallory, move to approve.
Thank you. In a second.
I would second, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Secretary Bissett. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Secretary Gillespie.
All right, thank you. Yes, so this last one is one of the ones I mentioned last week. And I do want to, as I start, thank Jody Ann Tritt and the Hospital Association for their help with technical assistance around this. And we'll be asking Ms. Tritt to help me explain the technical aspects, some of the technical aspects of this proposal. What we have been trying to do in putting this request for $60 million together is to create some funds that can be used to address hospitals in our state that are in immediate jeopardy because of the pandemic and what has gone on for the last 2 years, that are now in immediate jeopardy of closing. I know some of you, and I know us, we are hearing from hospitals that are reaching that stage where they have gone from having problems to being what we've chosen to use as a term, immediate jeopardy. They are looking at whether or not they're going to have to now close their doors. For hospitals that were most of these hospitals are in rural or smaller areas of the state, counties less than 50,000. They are not connected to large systems. They really had a very thin margin to be able to work with as we went into the pandemic. And for them getting their footing back to be able to move towards long-term sustainability is really very much an issue. So the concept we came up with was to have a way for a hospital that is in this type of immediate jeopardy to be able to come and apply for up to 3 months, essentially, of their labor costs, payroll and contracted labor costs, as an allocation that they could receive and then be able to use. As you can see, they could then use that money between now and July of 23 to be able to provide some relief around payroll cost, retention, and hiring. So much of what is going on is around staffing, and staffing is obviously the largest expense for a hospital. And get that short-term relief while also putting together a sustainability plan, which they would submit within 90 days of receiving the money. So this is the concept that we had. And Jody Ann, if I could turn it over to you, could you explain how immediate jeopardy would be determined?
Sure. I'm Jody Ann Shred. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Arkansas Hospital Association. And I will emphasize both what Representative Wardlaw said about staffing is critical. It is the most important thing. And we've got more than 50% of our expenses in hospitals are related to staffing. So he's absolutely right. Until we get the supply up, we're going to continue to have trouble really paying for healthcare personnel. And then secondly, Director Gillespie, I want to absolutely emphasize what you said earlier in one of the previous presentations, which means sustainability is actually more revenue, period. As supplies have increased and cost of personnel, cost of pharmaceuticals, all of those things are through the roof. Our payer mix matters in rural Arkansas a lot. And I will remind you all that hospitals had to take out Medicare accelerated payments early in the pandemic, and those things are coming due now. So the formula that we work through, and trust me when I tell you, the Hospital Association usually comes to you with proposals and requests to help every single hospital in the state, frankly, whether they're our member or not during COVID. But we fully recognize that you all have helped us sustain our ability to stay open thus far. Those Medicare accelerated payments that hospitals had to take out, they did so to keep their beds open and to be able to take COVID and non-COVID patients in the middle of the pandemic. And now those payments are due back to the federal government. So I will say that right now we're in a crisis point, and we've got hospitals that have had to cut services. They've used any reserves that they had. So the smartest way we could think of to be really fair for those hospitals that are in immediate jeopardy and need help to sort of bridge, if you will, through the process of repaying those Medicare accelerated payments is to look at what we call a quick ratio. And a quick ratio basically is what are your assets that are that you have right now, your cash, things that you can put in cash to help you pay your debts, those kinds of things. And then obviously debts are things like payroll, labor cost, those Medicare accelerated payments, pharmaceutical bills that you have coming, contracts that you still are paying on for travel nurses, travel respiratory therapists, and others. So we wanted to be sure that if hospitals had the ability, if they've got resources available to them now, we wanted them to use them first, right? That's why we want the quick ratio to be of less than 1. And then we took that one step further and said, also, you've got to have less than 90 days cash on hand or an operating margin less than 10% in Q1 or Q2 of 2022. If you all want me to explain the Medicare accelerated payments and how those work and what's happening to hospitals, I'm happy to do it. It does get pretty technical, so I don't want to bog you all down in the details. But those are some of the reasons that hospitals are in trouble. And I do want to emphasize, it's obvious that this is a narrow group of folks, and Director Gillespie has it right. Payer mix is incredibly important for hospitals. And what they've done in really narrowing the definition of which hospitals are eligible is kind of pinpoint and highlight those with payer mixes that usually are governmentally, you've got more Medicare and Medicaid, in other words, than you do commercial insurance payers. And that is where the problem comes in, especially with those hospitals that had to take out loans to stay open when they were taking care of COVID and non-COVID patients in the big surges, because now that debt that they had to take out from the Medicare accelerated payments is due. And if you've got a hefty number of Medicare patients who are still coming to see you, your payments right now, most of those hospitals are reduced up to 50%. You all know that sequestration kicked in. Medicare doesn't pay 100% of costs for hospitals, especially not in Arkansas with the area wage index and other issues. So you're getting less than cost already. And then if that payment is cut by another 50%, hospitals can't make ends meet with labor costs as high as they are, with expenses as high as they are, and with pharmaceutical costs as high as they are. So we did work pretty diligently. We're sad that we narrowed the field enough because we know not all hospitals are going to be helped with this funding. But we did try to help direct those hospitals that don't have sort of a network of additional resources to help them to where we use the money as wisely as possible and to keep those critical areas really open right now. I'll be happy to answer any questions. And Director Gillespie, if you want me to go into more detail, you know I will.
Thank you very much. We put a cap of $10 million, which should, for the hospitals that would fit in this, most likely fit in this first round, if we do end up using up the funding, should more than cover their 3 months of payroll. And as you can see from the way we've set this up, it would be to address first those hospitals. There are 3 sets of criteria there that are listed, but it's really to address those hospitals, as Jody Ann said, that their payer mix, they're independent and their payer mix is not as favorable. Then after that, the critical access hospitals, if any of them are in need by that point. And then if there's anything left, we would look at the rest of any other hospital that has come forward. For a hospital to come forward and say they are in immediate jeopardy is a very big statement by a hospital. So while we know we have some that will meet this and are in need, until we actually get this out there, we don't know how many will. But it is also a very, very large step for a hospital to take. And so that's why this one is set up very different than in the past, where we have just distributed money to everyone. And with that, I do have Elizabeth Pittman on, as well as Jody Ann, and we're happy to take any questions.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Ingram, please ask your question.
Secretary Gillespie, I sort of understand the narrowing of the field, but I've got 2 hospitals in the heart of the Delta that are taking on this big impact. They have been they have been there all these years and are struggling to go on, but they're system hospitals. Where do they turn to? They've been good corporate citizens. They have looked after their folks, and for them not to be eligible for this money, I mean, how do we risk a system hospital, 2 that are critical to the care in the Delta, where our needs are so dramatic that they not be able to hold on?
No, Senator, we do understand, and this has been part of really trying to target 2 very specific hospitals. We've had a discussion around system hospitals, and as you can see, system hospitals come last in this. My own personal, if I could just say it this way, if we have a large system in our state that is at the point of immediate jeopardy, not to call anyone out, and this is not saying but we know some of our system hospitals, the big system hospitals, UAMS, Baptist, others do struggle right now. They've been very public in the newspaper about it. But a large system hospital like that, one of those large systems being at the point where they might close, quite bluntly, if a Baptist or a UAMS or other large system hospital system in our state were to come in and say, we are about to have to close the system, we would be doing a whole lot more together, the legislature, DHS, and others, DFA and others, besides looking at some ARPA funding. That would be a real problem.
Yes,
we
ma'am.
do work with all types of hospitals and systems when they are in short-term need. And that's something I don't know if yours have contacted our Medicaid director, Dawn Staley, but when a hospital is in need and needs temporary advance elements like that, we work with them. And we are also right now in Medicaid undergoing rate review around hospitals. And we know the rates will change as we go through this. So that is going on right now, which will benefit all the hospitals in the state.
Well, I appreciate you talking about the large systems, UAMS, and the ones that are across the state. Everybody is not immune from this, no matter whether you're large or small. My point would be, why would we not be able to carve out rural small system hospitals to make them eligible as we carved out? These are all, I know there's two specific hospitals that we're trying to address, but the two hospitals I'm referring to are very similar in nature. They are not eligible simply because they are a system hospital. Why could we not carve out for them the opportunity to access this money so that they can, take care of their folks? I understand, appreciate, but I'm not worried about the big systems. I'm talking about rural healthcare right now. What's the problem with that?
In trying to target, part of what we looked at was if a hospital is part of a system, then the system itself has resources and can help that hospital. The first round of targeting is really aimed at those that are independent and don't have anywhere else to turn.
What if your
and
system
that's
is
part
in
of why
bankruptcy?
we've gone in this direction.
What if your system is on the verge of bankruptcy or in bankruptcy and meets every one of these criteria that you've laid out for the hospitals that you are targeting? Why would they not be eligible?
I think what I'm trying to say is if we actually have a large system that is in that type of trouble, it's something that I would hope you and others would bring forward over to us so that we could look at it separately outside of this. $60 million in hospital world is not going to go very far at all. And we were trying very hard not to bring in another $150, $200 million proposal, but to bring something much more targeted. As you can see from Jody Ann's expression, she would have preferred that we brought in something that was much, much larger. But at this point, what we're trying to do is take this piece by piece. That is not to say that if there is a system on the edge of bankruptcy, that we're going to ignore it. It needs to be dealt with outside of this specific request, because the $10 million would not do them any good.
Why don't we add language to this that if you're on the verge of bankruptcy, that you'd be eligible? That's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
I have a quick question, Secretary Walther.
Okay.
Stacey Hurst. Secretary Gillespie, this is a subject I admit I know very little about, but I think that this is a limited pool of hospitals that would be eligible for this money. So are these hospitals that prior to the pandemic were in relatively healthy financial shape? Did the pandemic cause the economic hardship to the point that they are going to go out of business, or did it exacerbate difficult situation already?
I'm going to let Jody Ann respond to that around this specific group of hospitals. But one of the things I do want to say is, you know, we watch every week our spending around all the different categories of services in Medicaid. And it was dramatic to watch as we went into the pandemic, the drop in spending that went to the hospital systems. They were overloaded with COVID patients, but the spending in terms of their normal services really dropped dramatically. And when you have 2 years of revenue under where you were in 2019, that hits hard. And so I do want to explain that I have a tremendous amount of sympathy for all of the hospitals out there. But to your point about exacerbating, you could have been making it, right? And then suddenly, when you have 2 years like that, and then on top of that, your expenses increase by 20% and more, that's just, it's a brutal formula that they've all been up against. And so their sustainability is something, which is why Representative Wardlaw talks about that there really has to be a focus on long-term sustainability, both in terms of getting the workforce as well as the operational structures. Jody Ann?
Yes, Secretary Hurst, actually, thank you for the question. I will tell you, we did sort of a voluntary survey of our members a few weeks ago to basically compare where hospitals were in 2019 versus where they are in Q1 of 2022. So to put it in context, and I'll also say that not all hospitals responded. Some of them were too busy trying to keep their doors open and let contracts and all those other things. But the ones that did, the average total margin for hospitals, and it's total, so not just net patient revenues, this takes into account everything that brings money in for hospitals. The average total margin in Q1 of 2019 was 2.6%, if I remember right. And this is, just from the hospitals that responded. And I will tell you, we had systems represented who do okay, right? Whose patient mix are pretty okay. The average total margin in Q1 for 2022, with all those folks that normally do okay, was almost at -1. So you can look at that swing just from Q1 of 2019 to Q1 of 2022 and self-reported information from our hospitals. I think one of the reasons that the Department of Human Services and others insisted that hospitals do come sort of hat in hand with a financial statement that shows their assets and their debts is to really prove how those revenues have decreased, or at best for some of these hospitals stayed the same, all while expenses have really gone up. And once again, not to beat a dead horse here, but those Medicare accelerated payments kept us open during those COVID surges where we could afford the contracts for the personnel to be by the bedside to take care of COVID and non-COVID patients. And they're due now at a time when expenses have not decreased. So that's just a recipe for disaster without real reimbursement change overall. Happy to answer any more questions.
Are there any more questions? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion for the approval.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we approve.
Thank you, Secretary. Is that do I have a second?
Second motion, Ken Ferguson.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed. Are there any more issues to come before the committee today?
Mr. Chairman, might I make one quick observation?
Yes, sir.
I I think that a lot of times in the legislature, we don't move until there's a crisis, and we don't understand. I think the vast majority, it may be in urban areas, might not understand it, but those that represent rural areas know what a crisis that we are in with our hospitals. And I think that for the next administration, along with the legislature, along with this group, and especially with our congressional delegation in Washington, we are going to have to get reimbursements up. We're going to have to make a concerted effort. We are spending $60 million today. As they used to say, we're just putting some Mercurochrome and some Band-Aids on a terrible situation. And long term, this is not sustainable. We have not had any increase since 1992 in reimbursements. We have got to work together with CMS on a federal level to get reimbursements up for these hospitals to survive. It's my understanding that the reimbursement level for hospitals in Arkansas is the lowest in the country. And certainly our people, our hospitals, and the people that work there deserve better. So I think this is a canary in the coal mine today. Arkansas, the Medicaid expansion, Arkansas Works, Arkansas Homes has served this state very well and kept our hospitals, especially our rural hospitals, alive. But now we see that we are going to spend $60 million in a short period to keep a couple of rural hospitals from going away. The hospitals that I referred to earlier on the systems hospitals are from Quorum. Quorum, I think, has let it be known that they could move if something doesn't change in a couple of years, that Forest City and Helena both could be looking for hospitals. That's not the trend we want in Arkansas. That will not keep businesses in the Delta. That won't keep business in Arkansas. So I implore our legislature, our congressional delegation, our incoming governor to do everything in their powers to get this CMS, go to CMS to get the reimbursements rates up to where our hospitals all across our state, not just rural, can survive. And with that, I appreciate you allowing me the leniency to say a few words.
Thank you, Senator Ingram. I appreciate that. Any additional comments, questions? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank everyone for being here.